It's high-profile celebrity stalking cases that steal the headlines. But statistics tell another side of the stalking story. More than 1 million people are stalked in the U.S. every year. Los Angeles prosecutor Rhonda Saunders has led the way in a nationwide crusade against stalking. Over the past 14 years, she has put hundreds of stalkers behind bars.
They look at me as the person who took away their liberty, the person who stopped them from getting to the victim, to their obsession.
Hollywood, Los Angeles, the world's highest concentration of celebrities and of celebrity stalking cases.
The celebrities, they want their fans, but sometimes the fans get a little rambunctious, and there is a thin line between a dedicated fan and a stalker. And it's when they cross that line that we have to be concerned. This is what's known as the Hollywood Hills, and the houses here are worth millions of dollars. A lot of celebrities live up here because they need the isolation and hope to live normal lives. They have to fortify their houses with high gates and barbed wire. It really is a high price to fame, and I don't think many people think about that.
One of the most famous addresses in the Hollywood Hills was the mansion belonging to pop sensation Madonna.
Back in 1995, Madonna probably was the biggest star, not only here, but in Europe. She sang, she acted, her face was on the cover of every magazine. She was big, big, big.
A fixated fan began turning up at Madonna's home.
Chris Henry, who was Madonna's assistant, was alone in the house. He said to her, "I'm Madonna's husband, let me in. Where is she?" Carice said, "She's not here, go away. You're not Madonna's husband either." He didn't go away. Instead, he threatened her. She was terrified. The transient takes out a note and puts it into this metal box by the gate. He said, "You better give her that note that I left, or I'm going to come back and kill you."
Basil went back to the call box to examine the note.
This was the first time we knew his name. He signed this note. And his name was Robert Hoskins. It was a very frightening note because he had written it on a religious tract, and the title of the religious tract underneath this, "I love you, marry me," was defiled. And that has a very serious meaning.
This is a fundamentalist, a Christian text, and if you read this carefully, it states that if a person has sex with anybody but their spouse, they should be killed.
Madonna was shown the threatening note left by Hoskins.
He had also told Basil Stevens that if she didn't marry him, he was going to slice her throat from ear to ear. But she said that that note disturbed him more because of the defiled.
Los Angeles attorney Rhonda Saunders, named by the press as the Queen of Stalking, gained worldwide attention when intruder Robert Hoskins broke into the Hollywood home of superstar Madonna.
Of all the stalkers that I have prosecuted for stalking female celebrities, Hoskins is the most dangerous one of all.
Madonna's heavily fortified estate had one dangerous weak spot.
How did he actually, get onto this wall? I mean, this wall is immense.
The first thing he did was came around to the front of the gate and threw his bags, his duffel bag and his backpack, over the fence.
That's right.
And at that point, he came and he put one foot up here on this pole. He grabbed onto the no trespassing sign, which is a bit pathetic, but he grabbed onto the no trespassing sign and it bent back and he fell backwards. He still leveraged himself again and managed to climb up on top of the wall and scale over. When his duffel bags went over, what that did was that set off the alarm. So that told me, with the electric eye inside, that told me the motion detectors that I needed to watch the closed-circuit TV.
It shows Hoskins going up to the front door of the house, and you could actually see him peering in through this little window. He actually tries the doorknob, and of course, it's locked. He then takes his backpack and he throws it onto the roof of a carport. And the carport leads to the pool area and where the bedrooms are, the actual house is. Talking about a man who had so much strength, he didn't even need a weapon. His weapon was his hands.
I always thought Robert was a bad man because he was very strong and he would take no crap from anybody, and he had no consequence about grabbing somebody and breaking their damn arm. You mentioned Robert Hoskins and people run away.
Fearing for his life, bodyguard Basil Stevens fired his gun twice at Hoskins. One bullet ripped into his arm, and the second hit him in the abdomen and lodged in his buttocks.
A mess. There's blood all over the place. I did think he was dead because he wasn't moving.
Basil called 911 and then Madonna.
Madonna wasn't at home. She was in her Miami home, which she had at the time.
She was terrified. Absolutely terrified.
She said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." Is he dead? And I said, "I don't know."
He could have gotten into the house if she was there. He could have grabbed a knife from the kitchen.
Not knowing whether Hoskins was dead or alive, Basil goes to check on him. But he was gone. Rhonda Saunders now had to prepare the case for trial.
As the investigating officer, Purdy brought all the documents to me to see what is it that we can file. Because there was more than the one charge. There was stalking, there was making criminal threats against Madonna, criminal threats against her assistant, assault against Basil Stevens. So we reviewed all of the reports, and then I wanted to talk to Madonna to make sure that she would be with the program, that she would come forward when we needed her.
Madonna's case was extremely difficult because of Madonna.
Madonna refused to cooperate.
She was working on the movie Evita, which was very important to her. She, at this point, didn't want anything more to do with this case. And I had to have her because in order for me to prove stalking, I had to show that she was in fear. And she was in fear. When I spoke with her, she told me about her nightmares. She even said that she never wanted to come back to Los Angeles again. But the problem was, unless she testified, I had no choice but to let him go. And I couldn't let him go, not knowing what I knew about this man.
Or you might go right to Madonna and shoot her in the head.
Prosecutor Rhonda Saunders was preparing for the trial of Madonna's stalker, Robert Hoskins. But the Material Girl was refusing to testify. Without her, they didn't have a case.
My office was very, very angry. We had put a lot of time, resources into this. She just didn't want anything to do with this. She wanted to block this thing out of her mind.
Rhonda obtained a court order demanding that Madonna appear at trial or face arrest with a $5 million bail.
Madonna was well aware that she had to be in court. and she kept her return to the area somewhat a secret, but I found out that she was back at the house.
Detective Purdy found Madonna out jogging near her home.
I said, I've got this subpoena for you. You have to be in court in 2 days. And I told her when, where, what time, which was stipulated on the subpoena. So she says, I don't know who you are. Leave me alone. She says, if there's one thing that you should already know about me, that is that I don't do what other people tell me to do. I do what I want, and I go where I want.
Purdy didn't give up and insisted on serving Madonna with the subpoena.
And I took the subpoena and stuck it in her arm as she ran, and she lifted her arm up and cast it to the sidewalk and stepped on it.
Here I had the subpoena with a footprint on it, and I said, Your Honor, she was served. I have Detective Purdy here, and this is her footprint.
And she showed up in court 2 days later.
She came in, and I remember she had her hair pulled back very severely, not a whole lot of makeup. She was wearing a very plain black suit.
Madonna took the stand and put on a star performance.
Oh, she was marvelous. She was so cool about it. She let the jury know that the reason she didn't want to come to court was that this man had made her fear so much. She testified, answered the questions very well.
Hoskins was unfazed by the seriousness of his situation.
He was smirking, and he was even humming Madonna songs. I could hear him. I don't know if the jury could, but I could hear him.
One of the concerns with celebrity and public figure stalking cases is that the minute the victim comes in to testify in court, you've just fulfilled a fantasy or an objective of the stalker, and that is to have some sort of closer personal contact.
And he knew that he had his claim to fame, that his name was going to be linked to Madonna's. Sitting right here in the witness stand, I can kind of understand what she was feeling, where you have the defendant sitting maybe 15 feet away from you. And she actually testified that coming to court and sitting this close to the man who had threatened to slice her throat from ear to ear was making her sick to her stomach.
Robert Hoskins was convicted of 3 felony counts. 1 count of making terrorist threats, 1 count of assault, and 1 count of stalking. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
If he would have killed Madonna, he'd have had a permanent name in history books for ever, okay? Nobody would ever forgot Robert Hoskins.
And Robert Hoskins hasn't forgotten Madonna. Inside his jail cell, Hoskins continues his obsession.
He'll send a picture of Madonna every now and then in a letter, or he'll throw a little phrase in there. That just tells me that he's still fixated on her, okay? No matter what these therapists thinks or anything, these letters, he's still fixated on her.
He was given the maximum sentence, which was 10 years in state prison. And then we were able to extend it because he was evaluated and still found to be a danger to the community. So right now, he's being held in a psychiatric hospital.
Do you know the kind of anger that's going to build up in a man like that in 10 years being locked up? He can fool him, you know, and get let out, and all hell can break loose.
He needs to be in a lockdown situation forever.
The day he gets out, I will buy a pistol, and I will have it on me at all times.
If released, there's no doubt in my mind that he would find her again, no matter where she's at.
Or he might go right to Madonna and shoot her in the head.
Stalkers don't always target the rich and famous to be their victims.
The majority of the cases that I handle are domestic violence stalking cases.
The life of a suburban housewife becomes a stalking nightmare.
This type of stalking case is the most dangerous.
Rhonda Saunders has dealt with over 1,000 stalking cases since she started work as a prosecutor in Los Angeles. Each of her case files contains a new victim, a new set of facts, and a new stalker. A far cry from the Hollywood celebrity lifestyle, Sharon Wilson was an ordinary housewife with 3 kids from suburban Los Angeles. But her story was far from ordinary. Sharon's stalker was no stranger. He was already inside her home.
Over 80% of the stalking cases that we see and people see across the country involve a domestic situation. These are the types of cases that most often end in some kind of violence or death to the victim. Patrick and Sharon Wilson lived in a lovely area. Sharon had a son from her first marriage who was living there with them, and then they had 2 daughters. So to all appearances, it looked like the ideal family, but that really wasn't the case.
Always he was angry about everything, about anything that didn't go smoothly. He would respond with anger.
Patrick had a rage in him that wasn't shown to the outside world. In fact, the only people that he showed it to was Sharon and his family.
The marriage started to fall apart when I started to leave home.
Sharon went back to college to become a teacher, hoping to make a better life for her family.
He was afraid that as Sharon became her own person, that as Sharon had her own income, even though it was helping the family, that he would lose this absolute 100% control that he had. It's a possessiveness. It's not love, it's possessiveness.
The relationship began to crumble.
There sure was a lot of mental violence, and that could be just as damaging as any type of physical violence.
I couldn't control his anger.
He would start to scream and yell and bully them.
It just was getting worse and worse and worse.
Things became so bad that after 15 years of marriage, Sharon filed for divorce and moved out of their home to an apartment across town, taking the children with her.
Patrick would not leave Sharon alone.
My email was flooded with pornographic sites. He thought that I was having affairs, and he would say, you're a whore. He told me that if I left, he would become the personification of evil.
Sharon got a restraining order against Patrick. But for the next 6 weeks, he continued to stalk her.
If she'd go to a friend's house, she'd look back, and there would be Patrick driving behind her or parked outside of her friend's house.
I would always watch in my rearview mirror to see if he was following me. I was hyper alert, always. He just wanted to let us know that he knew where we were and that he could hurt us. I just knew that I was being terrorized.
3 months later, their divorce was finalized. Sharon was given custody of the children and their $250,000 home.
He hated that. He just absolutely was furious. And that was when he started going on this rage of just total destruction.
Neighbors started hearing very strange noises, in the middle of the night, in fact, sawing noises and drilling noises.
To escape bad memories, Sharon continued to stay at her apartment across town. Meanwhile, Patrick paid a visit to their home.
I got a phone call, and this cop's voice is shaking. And I had never heard, and by then I'd been talking to a few policemen, I had never heard a cop's voice waver. And he said, "Ma'am, do you have any friends around who could bring you up here?" And I said, "I'm sure I can find somebody." And he said, "There's been some vandalism." And he said, "You need to get up here right away."
Sharon met Sergeant Joe Koch at the house.
As you first walked into the house, the first thing that you could see was the writing there on the wall, which basically said, "Danger, do not enter." And right then, you knew that this was more than just some random vandalism. And here you can see a saw cut through a main supporting beam that just goes all the way up to the ceiling. There's no way to repair that. You'd have to, you had to do so much extensive work to replace a beam like that. And it was like that throughout the house. The toilet was completely shattered again, probably with a hammer or some type of something heavy. As we were walking through, we could actually feel the floor giving underneath our feet. And in fact, I had told Mrs. Wilson that if you hear any unusual cracking or anything, just turn around and run. And we were going to, get out of the house.
We went down underneath, and the 4x4 support beams going up to hold the house up had been cut.
That's where the post sat right there. That's the cutout there in the carpet. And it attached right there, and you can see the nails that were sticking out, which had attached the beam, or the post originally to the beam.
The damage was so brutal, I felt as if the house had been raped.
If you were going to destroy a house, I can't think of a better way to do it unless you had a bulldozer. Her whole house was destroyed. There's no repairing this. This house has to be completely torn down.
With her house and marriage totally destroyed, Sharon had no choice but to sell the property and try to move on with her life.
This was a total shock to her, but she really didn't expect what was going to happen next. Detective Digby had everything. He had him purchasing the containers for the gasoline. He had him purchasing the gasoline. He had him purchasing the chainsaw, because Patrick had actually purchased the chainsaw here in California. He even found the matches that Patrick used to set off the fire.
Patrick was arrested by the local sheriff's department and taken to meet Digby, where he was confronted with the evidence against him.
Patrick Wilson buried his head in his hands on the top of the table like this and started crying. Within a minute or so, it just all came out. He told us exactly how he set the fire and why.
This case was not a case about someone just suddenly going off the edge. Patrick Wilson had planned this event down to the last detail. He had punched holes in the wall of the house. When he set the fire, he was hoping that the fire would go through the holes in the wall and that it would completely undermine the structure of the house.
Patrick Wilson was charged with 1 count of stalking and 2 counts of arson. Concerned for Sharon's safety and wanting to keep Patrick behind bars, Rhonda Saunders offered a plea bargain.
We believed that it was in the interest of justice to have him plead to the actually more serious charge of arson of a residence and drop the stalking charge, as long as Sharon would be safe.
Patrick did plead guilty to arson and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Sharon and her 2 daughters have gone into hiding. Patrick Wilson has served his time. He has now been released. Madonna's stalker, Robert Hoskins, remains confined in a psychiatric facility. His release date is yet to be determined.
When I first see these victims, their lives are just so totally destroyed. They're afraid to go out of their houses. They're afraid to function as human beings. They've been destroyed. And then I keep in touch with a lot of them. And then when I see them a year, 2, 3 years later, they're living full lives. And it's just so satisfactory to me that I have a type of job where I can actually help people, maybe save a life here and there. But it's the best job that I could think of doing.